Welcome to Behind the Screens, Conversations with Background Screening Pros. I'm Les Rosen, your host, and I'm excited to have you here. On this podcast, we chat with the people who know the background screening world inside and out. Executives, industry experts, legal pros, and more. We dive into their personal stories and insights to give you a real look at what's happening behind the scenes. Whether you work in the screening industry or are just curious, Behind the Screens bring you the real, unfiltered conversations from the people who make it all happen. Stick around for stories you won't hear anywhere else. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another episode of Behind the Screens, Conversations with Background Screening Pros. I have made my best efforts to pick people who I thought were the most interesting people in the screening industry, who have contributed a lot, and perhaps names and faces you see all the time, but may not know a lot about them. And today I'm delighted to have as a guest a person who's truly a remarkable lawyer, who I've done work with and who is just delightful to work with and done a lot of great things for the screening industry, Jennifer Mora. Jennifer, say hello. Oh, no, it's my pleasure. So I think a lot of you, or most of you, probably know her already, because if you follow LinkedIn or lawyers on LinkedIn or lawyers in the screening industry, you'll see lots of articles. She was one of the very first person to take a look at issues surrounding marijuana laws and the use of marijuana, how that relates to things, along with a whole variety of sort of the typical compliance issues around background screening and class actions and accuracy and FCRA and, various fair chance laws and the special laws, and even goes down to the county level. Now, Los Angeles has its own law, which differs a little bit, as I recall, from the San Francisco law. But we're not going to get into all that stuff. We're more interested in finding out more about Jennifer. So let me start off by asking, what is your current role? What is it you do these days, and what do you find most interesting about that?
Yeah, sure. So I am Senior Counsel at Seyfarth Shaw in San Francisco. I started off their Century City office in 2017, and I moved up to San Francisco during the height of the pandemic. Everybody was leaving the city, and I decided to move in. I spend most of my practice, I'd say about 50% of my practice is spent on background screening, advice, and counsel. I don't do any of the litigation at all. I've really tried to avoid that. I'm more of a counselor. And most of that is spent advising employers. I do some consumer reporting agency advice and counsel, but most of what I do is working with employers on, building their background screening processes, reviewing their forms. I'd say most of it is, a client will call me and say, I'm dealing with this right now. Somebody has a bunch of pending cases out of New York. We're thinking about not hiring them. What do we do? And I walk them through the various issues that come up. So I would say that's a big part of my practice. And then I also advise on the cannabis testing considerations, medical and recreational nationwide. And then to sort of really mix things up, I also am a traditional labor attorney. I've been doing that actually my entire career since even law school when I interned at the National Labor Relations Board. So I have a very unique practice, I think. And it's definitely never a dull moment in my world. At least that's what I think.
Well, that must be interesting. So you spent an internship with the NLRB, which is, labor law central for the entire United States. So that must have been really interesting to be in the heart of the beast.
Yeah.
And when you say you do traditional labor law, does that include wage and hour, rest breaks?
No. So traditional. Yeah, so you have employment law, which would be wage and hour, meal and rest periods, employment discrimination, things like that. And then traditional labor refers to employers' relationships with unions. So you could call it also labor management relations. So union elections, collective bargaining, unfair labor practices. So I represent employers when they essentially are dealing with union relationships or trying to stay union free, for lack of a better term.
So that's a broad spectrum, all the way from cannabis laws to unionization. Well, that's great. What do you find the most interesting about doing all that? Does it keep you awake at night, keep you challenged?
The law, I would say in all three areas, yeah, for sure. It's evolving. I mean, there's always something new. We just had in the background screening this unincorporated LA County ordinance, which is the most aggressive, I would say, and onerous in the country. I do advise on the background screening and marijuana issues nationally. Every year, right after an election, we'll see new jurisdictions with cannabis laws. And then the NLRB, I mean, that agency is highly politicized. So the law constantly goes back and forth. We call it the pendulum
Right.
swinging back and forth, depending on whether a Democrat or a Republican is in the Oval. So it's just all three of them really keep me on my toes. I have to make sure that I stay in touch with, industry experts. I'm reading a lot. Webinars, because it just changes so fast, all three of them.
Right. So you attend a lot of webinars. I see you give a lot. I mean, you're at PBSA quite often and giving webinars or on behalf of other organizations, but I guess you're also attending as much as you give to keep up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I sometimes, I'll even read what other law firms are writing on a subject just to see if they're coming up with a different perspective. Because,
Right.
lawyers, we sometimes can't agree on what a law says. So, it's nice to know what everybody else is saying. But look, I can't be a good counselor and a good lawyer if I'm not staying on top of what's happening.
Right.
And so part of that is not just presenting myself, but also being an attendee and a learner.
Oh, fascinating. So what was your path to get where you are now? Because you're doing so much. How did you get there? What did you do? What was your yellow brick road to get to where you are now?
It was all very accidental. My undergrad's in criminal justice. So when I went to law school, I thought I was going to get people off death row. And then I just kind of went a different path. I ended up interning at the NLRB. And so, it's really hard to find attorneys with that experience, especially newer associates. So I had a firm kind of scoop me up. In terms of the background screening, I started in this practice 15 years ago in 2009 when I was at my prior firm, Littler Mendelsohn. Was working with Phil Gordon, who's a big participant in PBSA as well, on a compliance project for a tenant screening company. And so that really required me to dig into all of the state statutes in addition to the federal statute. And so that was a lot of work. And then once, we all know Rod Flegel, once he kind of found out, there's an associate who actually knows what the FCRA is, he, immediately latched onto me and trained me, really took me under his wing. And the rest was history. I ended up leaving to join Seyfarth to work with Pam Devada because she does so much advice and litigation for consumer reporting agencies. And I felt like I wanted to add that perspective to my practice. Since up until that point, I had only been working with employers. So, it's just been kind of growing and meeting the right people and staying involved and constantly learning and doing the best that I can.
I think it's really kind of interesting and fantastic. You got to work with Rod and you got to work with Pam, and so that dynamic duo, that's really great.
Yeah.
What do you like most about your career in the background screening industry? And as you said, you're not entirely focused on background screening, but as to the part of your practice where you do, how do you find that interesting, or what do you like about it?
The stories are just kind of interesting. I don't want to say they're funny because, we are dealing with people for the most part who are ex-offenders. But you can imagine, sometimes you read a background check report and you're kind of blown away by what you're reading. Or as people can file disputes or they have a conviction and they want to advise an employer of, evidence of rehabilitation or why you should hire me. And people just sometimes come up with the wonkiest things. And so, I find myself kind of smiling a lot because every time I think that, it can't possibly get any more interesting than this, it somehow does. It's just never the same thing. It's always something different and interesting. And, I also find that it's sort of, I can't ever tell a client, it's their business. So I can't tell them you should hire somebody, you shouldn't hire somebody. I kind of look at it as like a puzzle. Here are your options, and I help them get where they need to be. And then sometimes it's nice to just sit back and see what they end up doing. But yeah, I just think that it's interesting because, the stories that I get to hear from clients sometimes that, just make us all laugh. And again, it's a serious subject because people have been in prison or might lose a job. But, people just, they'll say some crazy things sometimes and you just kind of got to laugh. And it brings a little bit of levity, I guess, to my life.
I mean, those are two great points. I've seen the same thing. One, you just, any time you say, I've seen it all. No, you haven't. Because that day something will come up that will be brand new out of left field. What? All right. And I think it's really true that sometimes we lose sight of the fact that we don't make hiring decisions. We're not the hiring police. if you're a background screener or labor lawyer, we can't really tell the client what to do, except maybe in like the most extreme, obvious situations. But we can guide them, give them a roadmap on how to make the decisions. That part's really interesting.
Yeah, again, I don't tell clients what to do, but there are times if I feel some particularly strong about a position, I will do my best to really try to sway them. And I think that, there still is a stigma with ex-offenders that, the mere fact that somebody has a conviction, that must necessarily mean they're a bad hire. So sometimes for me, it's about getting employers to really rethink that, which is, look, these people have served their time, particularly if it happened a long time ago, they've paid their debt to society. But I mean, there are some employers who are just very stuck. It's kind of the same with the marijuana issue too. Some people are still very anti-marijuana, and it's like, 70% of America supports it. So you kind of got to shift your perspective at some point.
You mean Reefer Madness is not a documentary and it's not true? All right.
A lot of companies are having a hard time hiring people because nobody's passing drug tests anymore. So some companies are, they've just decided we're not going to test for it at all pre-employment because we can't hire anybody.
I've actually seen companies say we got to stop testing for marijuana because all our good candidates, particularly if they're in the creative sphere, we can't hire anyone at all.
Right. Right.
Oh, that is, well, so there's never a dull day then, right? Right. I mentioned, and we'll get back to this idea of working with ex-offenders, but I see on your LinkedIn, I just know from going to various PBSA events that you are a frequent presenter on a number of topics. So what's been the role of PBSA in your career, and what do you think the value is of PBSA to background screeners and employers?
The one thing I love about PBSA is that even though all these background check companies are competitors, for lack of a better term, it really is a tight-knit family, and everybody gets together, particularly at the annual and the mid-year. I attend a lot of the webinars. They put on their webinar series. I present as often as I can when I'm able to travel. So for me, it's meeting a lot of some really interesting and smart people in this space, and being open and teachable and hearing what everybody else is doing. As a lot of CRAs, they don't do the same thing as other CRAs.
Right,
so it's kind of interesting. But, I think for me, it's been the relationship building that I've gotten out of PBSA. We're a fun group, and when we get together, we know how to have a good time. So it's always fun.
Oh, that's great. And I hear people talk about not only professional friendships, but lifelong personal friendships that you form at these events as well.
Yeah.
No, that's great. And I was not able to go to the Boston 2024 meeting. Were you there? Were you?
No, I was not.
Oh, okay. And I think next year is in Anaheim, so we're both in the San Francisco area, so it'd be kind of hard to have an excuse not to go down there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a little easier when it's in Boston, and I can say, that's kind of that's why I actually haven't been going to mid-year recently. It's kind of a journey to go to the East Coast from the West Coast. But yeah, if it's in Anaheim, I'm going to have to be there. I don't know if Pam's going to let me out of it.
All right. Okay, well, we'll see how that works out. Okay. So let's switch a little bit from career paths and the law and so forth. Outside of the law and background screening, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your hobbies, your interests, what you do for fun, things or outside of work?
Yeah, I love to knit. I'm an avid knitter. I'm an avid reader. I knit these elaborate shawls. There's a designer in Amsterdam, and he has a mystery knit along every year, and thousands of people across the country do this mystery knit along, and I'm actually doing one right now. So
wow.
I have a pile of shawls that I've made. No, I don't wear them all at the same time. I love to read. I'm addicted to true crime. Like I said, I got my undergrad in criminal justice, so I didn't get to go that path, but, true crime, the Oxygen Channel, Dateline, all buried in the backyard. Right. There's all kinds of interesting shows, so I like to do that. I have a little Boston Terrier who's napping next to me named Ozzy. And I exercise and spend time with friends, and I'm pretty easy, simple, busy life here in San Francisco. So I would say I spend a lot of it working, and when I'm not working, I do what I can to just kind of decompress. And living here too, I've become a big foodie, which is easy to do, as you know.
I was about to mention that for those of you not from San Francisco, you can in every neighborhood. I mean, you can be in neighborhoods where tourists are never to be seen, and step out your door and either go left, right, or straight, and there's some fabulous restaurant.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. We have the best. I think we have the best food here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just me.
And again, for the non-Bay Area people, there's a great show, and maybe other cities have it, but check please Bay Area, and maybe other public channels have it. But we follow that. We listen to the restaurants and try and go to some of those as well. And it's just these amazing restaurants in the middle of areas where a tourist hasn't been seen for years. It's just like the heart of the city. So, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay. And, following up on a little bit of all this, tell us something or some of the things you do that are not particularly related to your job per se that you might want to share with people.
Yeah, this is kind of related to my job a little bit. My firm is big on pro bono work, and so I do a ton of work for veterans. I do pro bono work for a nonprofit here in the Bay Area called Swords to Plowshares. And they do discharge upgrade paperwork for veterans. So that's essentially when a veteran is thrown out of the military and they've got bad papers. And so I will get their file and help, work up a letter to the Navy. I tend to help people who are sailors or Marines. We're asking the Navy, for whatever reason, maybe somebody got popped for drugs, maybe somebody, I helped one man who was thrown out because he was homosexual. So I do a lot of that work, and I find it extremely rewarding. It is part of my work because, again, I get it through Seyfarth, but I mean, it really brings me a lot of joy, and some of the most fulfilling stuff that I've done is to help somebody who really needs it and doesn't have the resources to help themselves. So it's a big part of my life I'm working on right now. So.
Well, that's interesting. So you take their DDT 214 and it might have some discharge code on it that prevents them from getting benefits or employment or something, and you try and get that straightened out.
Yep. And I've done two. I've won both of them. I'm on my third, so let's hope 3 times the charm.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I saw you also have worked with some other nonprofits and received some recognition for some pro bono. Was that related to Swords of Plowshare, or also you work with second chance sort of organizations as well?
I haven't done any second chance organizations. I've actually been wanting to do more of that work, but I do a lot of pro bono work for Public Counsel, which is they're in Los Angeles and they're the nation's largest pro bono law firm. I was doing veterans work for them, but I also do some employment work. So I do handbooks and policy reviews for nonprofit, small community organizations, usually organizations that are helping, like youthful offenders. I've got one that is teaching STEM to minority kids. And so I'll help them with their advice work because they can't afford outside lawyers, but they need help too because they have to comply with the employment laws. And, especially in California, we all know that, if an employer gets sued for meal and rest period violation, that could bankrupt them. So I do a lot of pro bono work for a lot of different organizations. And it's great. And it's what I love about Seyfarth is such a huge emphasis on pro bono, and they give us hours credit, and it's encouraged, and it's great.
So I can't help but ask, but how do you, I mean, what you described, how do you find time for all this? I mean, you get more done by noon than I get done in a week. I mean, how's that possible?
It's a lot. Yeah, it's exhausting. It's a lot. But, when you enjoy it, you don't even notice. I mean, to me, that's the key. It's not hard to work hard when you're enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm very efficient. I work smart. So, there's this veterans thing I have going on right now. We have first years that need work. And so have fun, so you can spend as much time on it. And so that's helpful, but it's exhausting, but I enjoy it.
I remember being a first year in a large law firm, and here, kid, stay busy. All right.
Oh, yeah,
I don't have to ever do that one again. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so, given all the exposure that you've had to the background screening world and PBSA, what would your advice be to someone who's either thinking of entering either the background screening or entering the law? What's your advice to them as far as going forward, career advice or personal advice at that stage in your career?
I think a big thing is to find your passion. Like, again, I work hard, but I enjoy everything that I do. It brings me a lot of joy. Sometimes not, but for the most part, I think it's important to really find what your passion is and figure that out sooner rather than later. You don't want to be a 25-year lawyer and think, oh, I've hated my job for the last 25 years. I should have been a tax attorney, or I should have done this. Figure out what you want to do. And then, once you figure it out, just remain teachable, get out, network, meet as many people as you can in your field. And that, would mean people on all sides too. And especially for somebody like me who has to work in a somewhat sometimes combative practice, which is labor relations, I do my best to get along with everybody, even people on the other side. So I would encourage people to not take life so seriously all the time. We've just got so much going on in this world. Try to have some fun with your job and your career, whatever that might be. And if it's not working out for you, you're never too old or young or what have you to make a change. So I'm a big fan of finding your passion and going full gusto for it.
Oh, that's great advice. And, and without, going too deep into that, that's a big topic. I mean, kind of what is your lodestar? I mean, in terms of your best advice in terms of someone finding their passion. I mean, people spend their whole life writing about that, but in 30 seconds or less, what's the best advice you can give somebody?
Maybe just dabble in things or read, or sometimes just get out the Wall Street Journal or some newspaper, and something will click. I think it's a matter of keeping your eyes and your ears open, and always just kind of open to whatever the universe throws your way, not be so closed off to it. And I think that when it's time and it's there, it'll just present itself. And you just kind of got to be open to it. Be open-minded, I guess, is the take.
Okay. Oh, that's so interesting. And if someone comes across you at a PBSA webinar, I'm sure that you would be happy to have them come up and introduce themselves and ask you a question or two. Yeah,
of course. Absolutely. I love meeting new people. I'm a hugger, too.
That's what now?
I'm a hugger, too, so be careful.
Okay. All right. There you go, folks. If you're at PBSA and you need a hug, find Jennifer Mora. All right.
Julie, I am also known for wearing my custom Charlie Brown Chuck Taylors to my PBSA session, so you can usually find me that way, too. Just look for the shoes.
So you'll be easy to find. Oh, this has been really interesting and wonderful to have you on. And let me just ask you, we covered a lot of ground. Is there any closing thoughts or anything you want to add or share before we close out here?
No, I'm just so delighted that, said you wanted to bring on interesting people. I've always thought I was somewhat boring, so I was super flattered that you described me as interesting. I've known you for so long, and I was delighted when I got your email, so I was glad to be here and participate.
No, well, I'm happy to have you. And in no way, shape, or form are you anywhere close to being a boring person. So that's why we're so pleased to have you as a guest. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've had a chance to spend with a longtime friend and colleague, Jennifer Mora, and one of the leading attorneys helping the screening industry and working in various aspects of it. And with that, let me thank Jennifer for participating, and I will see everyone at our next webinar. Jennifer, thank you very much.
Thanks, Les. It's good to see you.
All right, that was yet another wonderful conversation with a background screening pro. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an update. And hey, if you got a moment, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It really helps get the word out. For more info or to catch up on past episodes, or to make suggestions or to suggest possible future guests, head over to our website. Once again, this is your host, Les Rosen, and it's been a pleasure to bring you another episode. See you on the next episode. Thanks.